What do you first notice when you enter a new environment?
Hey listeners, welcome to In the Arena. I'm Jackie Goldberg.
And I'm Leah Smart. And today we are joined by Jess Amortegui and Brad Lawrence to talk about the amazing Enneagram. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Enneagram, it's an assessment tool that's rooted in both psychology and ancient spirituality. And it provides insights into our inner motivations and also builds self-awareness so we can grow and improve our relationships. So we're so excited to have these two here. They are certified in the Enneagram and they have some other incredible things in their backgrounds that we'll introduce you to. So I'll start with Jess. Jess has been, well, first of all, Jess is my manager, which is really exciting. She's been with LinkedIn since April 2019. Is it, Jess?
Yes. Oh my God, I can't believe how long it's been.
Yeah. April 2019. It feels like 10 years. But before that, she was with other tech companies like Logitech. She's also with Nike, a bunch of other amazing places. But we are so glad that she landed here. She also got her master's in applied positive psychology at UPenn. And she is, like I said, certified in the IEQ-9, which is one of the types of Enneagram certifications and assessments that you can engage in. And Jess is now the senior director of L&D, and she's in charge of executive development. Something fun and exciting is Jess and I are both type 7s, and that might mean nothing to you right now, or it might mean everything, but I will tell you it makes for a hilarious duo. We're highly entertaining, lots of energy. And Jess is just one of those people that when you meet, you immediately love her. So I'm so happy that you guys get to share in some of her magic today. And I'll let Jackie introduce Brad.
Thanks, Leah. And so excited to have you here, Jess and Brad. So also a fun fact, Brad has been my manager for the past 2.5 years, recently parting ways, but we've worked so closely together. So excited to have him on today's podcast. And also, interestingly, is that we are both type 2s. So when Leah and I were thinking about this episode, something we loved was that our managers and I and each of us had the same types as the other person. And so we'll talk a little bit about that today. But just to intro Brad, so Brad has been with LinkedIn for 7 years. He's been in multiple roles between sales and customer success. Currently, he's a senior manager in customer success in the talent solutions business. He has a bachelor's in human and organizational development from Vanderbilt and then an MBA from Harvard. And he's super passionate about the Enneagram, and at LinkedIn has hosted multiple workshops for our organization that have been dedicated to really teaching others about the Enneagram and helping them experience it in their own way. And he is also certified in the same way that Jess is. And I know, Leah, you are now getting your certification through the Integrative Enneagram. So really excited to jump into it. But as our listeners know, before we get started, we love to do some speed dating questions to get to know both of you a little bit better. And I'm going to kick us off. And something different that we're doing is speed dating questions related to the Enneagram. So Brad, why don't I start with you? And then we'd love for both of you to answer the questions so we can get to know you both a little bit. So the first question, I'll hand it to you, Brad, is what do you most appreciate about your type?
Awesome. And yeah, as Jackie alluded to, I'm a type 2, which we'll explain in a little bit. But 2s have a heart for others. And I think when we're healthy and we're alive, we can pour into others and be selfless and really connect and just sit in emotions and vulnerability, I think when done well.
Awesome. And Jess?
First of all, I love the caveat of a healthy 7. So when healthy, we're at my best. I think the thing I most appreciate is the levity and playfulness that 7 brings to things. Even in situations that can feel heavy, they will come in and lighten that bad boy up in just a few seconds and get people laughing and feeling a bit relieved too.
Cool. And then question 2. So Brad, what is something funny and quirky about your Enneagram type? And then Jess is next.
Totally. So this is not scientifically studied, but one thing I have heard from many 2s, and also on some podcasts, so it's got to be true, is that 2s often love going to movies by ourselves. So I love movies personally, but I think many 2s, including me, if we go to our movies with a loved one or a friend, we're so attuned to how that person is receiving the movie and their experience that we forget about enjoying it and relaxing. And so for a 2 to slow down and enjoy like that art, that's such a healthy move for 2s, but also a place to be by ourselves and not responsible for taking care of anyone. So it's kind of like a fun, like, do you like, when I meet twos, I'm like, do you like going to movies by yourself? Because I do. And it's kind of like a moment where you can connect.
Love it.
Okay, so I feel like sevens don't like doing pretty much anything by themselves. So that's, so one of the quirky things is this doing a lot all of the time. And so we'll kind of get into the motivations of why this is. But, when you think of a million tabs up on your computer screen, that's like the sevens brain in life. And it's actually scary without that. So I think of this image that I remember when I was first introduced to like the perils of multitasking. And there was this great image of someone who was like on the toilet that had it had pedals where they could bike. And then, they were eating, and then they had like the TV up. And I was like, no, that is like, that's it. That is me. Like a million things have to be going on at once, or else you'll just hear I'm bored. Right. So it's just like overstimulation.
I love it. And Brad had actually given a workshop to our organization recently. And the funny thing is that we had different breakouts, but before the breakouts, the sevens made their own breakout on a side chat and talking about all different things. They had to be multitasking and connecting and being into it on their own. And so we all found that really funny, like within the workshop, actually doing that. So
they're like planning their like virtual happy hour.
We totally were.
Move on.
Exactly. Okay, so final speed dating question. So Brad, if you can spend a day as another type, which would it be and why?
It would totally be a 5. I think I love 5s, and they are so different than me. 5s are those individuals who can really seek and understand knowledge and are so gifted at doing that, but also have very strict boundaries about their energy and how they manage it. And I don't. I have no boundaries towards others and don't really slow down very well. And often when I'm seeking knowledge, I'm kind of keeping my head up and being kinetic towards something else. And so the ability for a 5 to think and like really be connected to that thinking side, which I can often be disconnected from, I have envy of. And I want to know them more and have them teach me their ways.
That's a great one. Jess, what about you?
Okay, I have a tie. So the first one would be a 6. And I think it's because it's where I'm probably the type I'm lowest in, but also just for me knowing, the 7 tends to be like the positive spinster, and a 6 just sees kind of the doom and gloom, I'll say, or they may see it more as the reality. But for me, just to step into and not be able to look at something and like find the silver lining and just live in that and see what that's like, I think would just engender a whole bunch more compassion for me. And the other one is an 8. And I feel like I have this just admiration for an 8 and the strength of an 8 and the intensity that 8s describe they feel inside. And I just want to feel what that's like, to have that kind of powerful feeling inside. So I couldn't decide. So 6 and 8 would be my top 2.
I once heard 8s described as like, you're an 8 when you can have conflict and be okay afterwards. And I have no idea what that means to like be okay after conflict. And so I'm like, that's amazing. And there's this power and this force that I think when 8s are healthy and vulnerable, but also powerful, like they can kind of truly impact so many.
It's so true. I'm like 7s. All 4 of us on this call are types that don't like conflict. So we're like, conflict is the end of the road for us. We want to see all the brightness. All right. Well, for our listeners, we're going to keep you on the cliffhanger for a minute because you're probably going, what are all these numbers that we're talking about? But before we get into the details of each of the types, Jess and Brad, we just want to know, like, what's your Enneagram story? What got you interested? What led you here? And I'll kick it off with Jess.
Well, I think there's 2 really kind of poignant moments that really shaped my understanding and connection with the Enneagram. And the first was, so when I first took the Enneagram, probably about 5 years ago now, I was in just like rock bottom part in my life, so low, facing addiction, facing just, feeling in the most probably self-destructive mode I've ever been in my life. And what the Enneagram did was it all of a sudden gave me a sense of meaning. Like I could understand, even with a degree of compassion, but this feeling that like, oh, this is what's going on. This is what's driving this behavior. And so for me, it was such a sense-making tool into myself to be able to understand what had led me down this road and how did I end up here? So I feel like that was powerful for me, and nothing had been, up until then, even exploring so many psychological assessments had given me that kind of profound insight. And I think the other was just the way it was framed to me that was so intriguing at the time, which I can remember someone saying, as a child, you learn early on that in order to get love, acceptance, and respect, you had a few go-to strategies. And it was almost like a drug. It's like an addiction. It's like, this is how I get people to love, accept, and respect me. And then you deploy those strategically over and over again because it feels so good until suddenly it just becomes who you are. And here you are, here I am 35 years later, right? And do these strategies still work? And who am I underneath that? And I think when I heard it positioned at that, it gave me this opportunity of, I saw this like sheath around me that I, had been carrying around that I thought was my identity, that I slowly wanted to unpack to get at who that essence of me really was. And that whole intrigue just kind of led me down this journey to see how much can I chip away at that and what's underneath that that's like been eager to come out and express themselves to the world.
That's incredible. I feel like you just sold me on the Enneagram and I'm already sold on it. So it's like all over again. I have so many questions, but just one question before we kick it over to Brad, like what has changed for you in the past 5 years and how have you used the Enneagram to be where you're at today?
Yeah, I mean, well, for me, I think of even a healing journey, both emotionally, physically. I was suffering through a series of chronic diseases. And to understand now and to catch myself when I'm starting to engage in these behaviors and to be able to have the compassion. And it's this feeling that I'm not alone. There's something also unique with this type 7. When I read it, I was like, other people have this too. Other people walk through the world, they see the world, they feel the world, they engage in the world, and even in these same both good and bad behaviors, the same as I do. And so that ability to connect with a greater humanity like eradicates the shame that it's just me. And so that to me has been powerful because I feel like I'm greater connected to something larger through this too, and giving myself an own sense of understanding. And then I think slowly, I'm able to just see myself in almost, it's that ability now to see myself as more, I can look at myself and even I can laugh at things, but I can disconnect of like, that's not me. And whereas before it was just like this, my identity was stuck in these behaviors, like it's just who I was. Now I can pull those apart and say, well, who am I and who do I want to be? Is that really the way I want to act and interact with people? And so it's just this separation too from what I do day in and day out in this space that I now have to see myself, to inquire about myself, to dig into myself, that I found so powerful.
Yeah.
There's such a compassion there. And I think the ability to connect with others and like look forward to like, I am who I am, but also like we can do this and kind of march forward. But I think the most important thing that you said is like the looking back. Like we all have, and the phrase is often used as childhood wounds, which is a heavy word. And some wounds are different than others, but we all had a certain experience growing up. And particularly in the corporate setting, it's hard to talk about or ask someone to talk about childhood at work. But the more we can individually, even if we don't want to share it, really examine who we are because of the role we played in our family system, the more we're going to really understand who we are, but also be able to move forward from that. That's awesome.
Brad, tell us your journey.
For me, I came across the Enneagram how probably a lot of people do, which is like through friends. And it's kind of gotten pop culture like hot these days in the last 5 years. And particularly where I live in Nashville, everybody was kind of talking about it. So I bought the book people recommended, The Sacred Enneagram by Chris Hewarts. And there's some within like different phase, people kind of picking it up. And I went on late at night and took the Ready, which is the Enneagram Institute's test. And I remember going up to my wife and saying like, I'm a 2, or I'm an 8 maybe, or a 7, but I think I'm a 2. I kind of want to be a 7, but I'm a 2. And I kind of read the book and kind of put it down. And then about a year later, I was on paternity leave with our second child, Caroline. And right before pat leave, I gotten some really tough feedback. I was at a point in my career where the expectations for me as a leader, I wasn't fully meeting them. I think particularly as a male too, I had learned that my emotions were too much, and vulnerability was like harder to bring into bear, particularly in the workplace, and it wasn't really welcome. But also that in my role, vulnerability was missing in how I showed up so far. And it was going to be critical for me to be successful. And Jackie was on my team at this time. I thought that work was, you'd be smart, you get a lot done, you'd be strategic. And that's great. But as a people leader in particular, like those things get you into the job sometimes. They don't help you be successful. They definitely don't help people transform. And so I was in this block of time investing in my family, but also with more space to kind of invest in me. So I listened to a ton of podcasts and just read all the books about the Enneagram, particularly how was I going to go back to work? What was my journey? And I remember bringing it to my team. So bringing it to my leadership team, and we all took the test and we did a bit of like a conversation about it, and they loved it. And we learned so much, and we asked questions, and we thought about bringing it kind of to a formal training to all of our leadership team, which I did. And I was like, wait a minute, like I have no idea what I'm doing. Like I've read a lot of books, but I kind of am scared to be doing this. And so, got certified in it and was able to kind of continue that conversation. But I think so much of anyone's experience of the Enneagram is based on a test. And it's so easy to put it in context of other kind of personality assessments out there. But the more we can like really focus on ourselves, not worry about the work context or the organizational context or relational context that we're taking it in, but just like take the test, but also step back and allow space. I tell people, anyone who does like a training or a test, like the most important work will be afterwards. Like, what do you step into? Is it a one-time thing? That's fine. But what is your journey and how do you connect those dots so it's not just like a periodic conversation?
Yeah. And something that I heard from both of you, you didn't use this term, but the fact that you had a language almost to speak to it, right? To go back and put this and make sense of it all and then apply it to your own journey and your own experience and bringing it back to yourself. And Brad, I'm going to ask the same question. And I know a little bit because being on your team and seeing you transform through all of this in terms of vulnerability, that word that you use, but what has changed for you since you took that test, 2+ years ago, and how have you grown from it?
Yeah, I think I'm just more aware of what triggers me and where I can get in trouble. It's like those stress areas, and it's akin to like meditation, right? Like you want to note things and move on. I can't stop them from coming up, but when I walk into a room, what is going to come up and why? And having that kind of self-compassion, releasing that shame that Jess talks about is huge. And I think the second is like having a language that we're all imperfect and that we all will have our things and we have our struggles, and it relates to this kind of humanity. It allows me to tell my story without feeling like I have to tell, my life story, but to say just who I am and like where I am today and meet people where they are. Because the more I can know myself, the more I can know others and truly care for them in the way that's best for them.
I love that both of you shared compassion in a way, whether knowing yourself, knowing others. Something I'm learning as I'm in the training for Enneagram with the IQ 9 is every type has the same end goal, right? It's like, how do I survive in this world? And that has been such a compassion-inducing thing for me, particularly the type 8s and type 1s have been my biggest trigger. And I have so much more compassion for why they set up the world the way they set it up and what their real motivators are. And so I love just using this as a way to have compassion for ourselves, know we're not alone, but also to look at others and go, oh, I get you. And now I understand how you want to be treated. It's different than how I need to be treated potentially, but we can actually come to a common ground if I can treat you in the way that serves you and how you need to survive in the world. Of course, the Enneagram's not meant to box us in. It's meant to help us transcend our type. But, at the start of it, you're just looking at the test going, oh my God, I'm a 7, I'm a 2. And you're kind of doing that first thing of really overly identifying with it before you move on. So I'm learning how to interact with other people in a way that supports them wherever they are on their journey. So what I would love to do, guys, because we're going to go so deep into this before we tell people what it is. So why don't we have you two share the types? There are 9 total types for anyone who's listening and not familiar. Brad's going to share types 1 through 4, and then Jess is going to share types 5 through 9.
Awesome. And I think that kicking this off with like speaking about the box is so important. As you learn about your types, and this is new, like don't put yourself in a box. In so many ways, the more you know your type, the more that box will fall away and you don't feel boxed in. And the Enneagram, again, is an ancient tool, and if you Google it, you'll see a image. It looks sort of like the Da Vinci Code. There is a circle and there's some lines connected. We're not going to go into that, but there are 9 types, 9 numbers that we'll use. The first one will start with number 1, and there's some words attached to each number. Some of the words for type 1 are the reformer or the perfectionist. The 1 sit in the body center, along with the 8 and the 9 that Jess will describe, and they control in so many ways their own behavior. They have an incredible ability to be standards of behavior and to understand the rules and what is right and wrong in the world, and to help others kind of do the same. They will find faults. They will be critical. They will challenge when the rules are being broken. And those standards can often be like an incredible ethical example for others. On to type 2. So the 2s, I'm a 2. We're the helpers or the givers. We start in the heart center, and we are incredibly aware of other people's feelings. We often know them better than we know their own feelings, and definitely better than we know our own feelings. So we're so attuned to helping others. And when healthy, like we talked about, we can be such an amazing resource for others and so altruistic. We can also give to get, and we can also do so in order to help ourselves feel better or get something else from someone in return. And we often don't express what we need because we're serving and serving until it's too late, and it kind of comes out the wrong way. So our threes are the achievers or the performers. They get so much done. They're the most corporate friendly number on the Enneagram, and they are amazing standards of excellence. They're goal oriented, they're task oriented, and they're models to others. They often like the stage, but they're often doing so in a way that is a little less authentic. And so their work is stepping into that heart and understanding their feelings, not who others want them to be, but who they are truly, and be that authentic expression. Because gosh, when activated, they can do more than all of us. Our 4s are romantics or the individualist. They're the most creative number on the Enneagram often. I live in Nashville. There's a lot of 4s here who produce such amazing content. They're deeply in touch with their own heart, but often a little less in touch with the hearts of others or kind of the world around them. They have a desire to be a little different than world and to be understood. And so that can lead to maybe being a little moodier, withdrawn, withholding. But again, when allowed to create and given that space, they can do more and create more beautiful things than any of us could ever believe.
All right, Jess, round us out.
All right. So we'll move on to type 5. So the type 5 archetype is this prototypical person who really lives in their head. You know, they focus on information and data, feel more comfortable engaging with people on an intellectual level. So a 5's attention is usually going to go to data, facts, how to produce results, collecting and analyzing the best information. And the 5 is really about examining human interaction from a distance and from a safe distance and maintaining boundaries, which Brad had talked about earlier, really relating to people through knowledge rather than through their actions. And one of the things that 5s really fear is the depletion of their kind of time and energy as key resources. And so that's really why they're erecting these boundaries to preserve that. Like I've heard a 5 say too, that it's like there's a gauge, an energy gauge throughout the day, and you start up full and quickly you just see it running and ticking until it hits empty. And so you're always trying to protect that take as a 5. So then our 6s. So 6 also often called like the loyal skeptic, right? So this is, this type 6 archetype is this prototypical person who seeks certainty and security, but also knows they're never going to find it. It's just not out there in this scary world. So, they focus a lot on forecasting problems so they can be ready to deal with it or meet with the challenges, right? So, we have a 6 on our team, and when this whole coronavirus hit, right, it's like, oh, people, like this was a week before, like you had no idea. I'm going to tell you, this is going to be horrible. The world is going to change. And like Lee and I are like, ha ha ha, like, yeah, you're so funny, right? Like this is going to blow over. This is not a big deal. Like, and look where we are, right? And so this is the thing with a 6 though, is that the thing they fear is fear. They will never identify this fear, though. To them, it's like, he's going, see, told you so. I told you people, this is the way the world is. It is a scary world out there that you have to prepare for. So, always in that kind of mode of what's going to go wrong. I think the other thing with this 6 is they kind of like to poke. They like to poke at ideas. They like to poke at people. So like poking the bear is like, I'm poking at you because I'm trying to get information. Can I trust you? Is something going to go wrong? What are you going to say? So I'm trying to get information out of people and things at all times. So that's where you have these questions that can sometimes even feel a little contrarian that they're always asking. So there is our 6. For a type 7, the type 7 archetype is really the prototypical person who wants more than anything to feel good, right? So, sometimes called an enthusiastic visionary or an epicure, they tend to have this unconscious belief that if they feel bad, they will get trapped in that forever. So it's the avoiding wanting to feel that way for fear that I can never lift myself out of it. So the 7 is also, they're shaped by an intolerance of limitation. So if it's crucial for them to feel like I want to do, think, and feel how I want to feel, and I don't want anyone limiting me or getting in my way. I'm going to do what I want, darn it, right? So the other thing is, this tendency for really like the bright, shiny object too, like always bouncing to the next thing that's going to bring me joy. What am I going to find there that's going to be my next source of happiness? And so you have a lot of like fear of missing out too, that a lot of 7s will display because they're always wanting to chase, not wanting to miss out for fear that they'll lose it. And then the 8. So we talked a little bit about the 8. The 8 archetype is really the prototypical person who thinks big, acts decisively, makes things happen. And their programming really tells them the only way to operate in the world is through asserting strength and avoiding expressing weakness of any kind. So they're primarily motivated really by the need to be strong, to take action. They're assertive, sometimes aggressive. Oftentimes others see them as intimidating. They're usually completely shocked by this. Like to them, it's like, me? Intimidating? Right? And meanwhile, we're all like quivering in our boots as like, when they say anything. We're so scared, right? And the real fear here, like driving this, is the fear of being powerless. Right? Because their identity is shaped by a focus on being powerful and strong and being able to protect others. So they fear being harmed, manipulated, taken advantage of, or left at the mercy of any kind of injustice. So that's their 8. And moving on to our 9. So the 9 is the archetype of here is the prototypical person who really focuses on others. So it can sometimes be mistyped with a 2, but the 9 is really seeking harmony and trying to avoid conflict. So while a 2 is really looking to be liked, a 9 is really looking just to avoid that conflict. And they're primarily motivated by the need to evade any sort of discomfort, to tension, to adapt or even over-adapt to others, to make sure everyone is heard, they're included. They'll focus a lot on others' agendas to the point where if you ask a 9, well, what's important to you? Or what do you care about? And they won't even know. I don't know. I'm so in service of making other people's, dreams and goals come into fruition that I don't even know what I want. And it can be as simple as not knowing what I want for dinner, to not knowing what I want in my career or life. So I call this a sort of sense of self-forgetting, forgetting who I am because I'm so focused on others. The real fear of the 9 is conflict, tension, discord. So their programming tells them that the way to find a sense of well-being in the world is to avoid rifts. So they're going to go along to get along. A lot of times in conflict, you will see a 9 just sort of camouflage. They poof, they ghost, they're gone. It's like, they're going to blend in is sort of the coping strategy to get away from it all. So there we have our 9. And I think that rounds us out.
That rounds it out. Thank you guys for those amazing descriptions. If you're listening and you haven't taken the Enneagram, what I notice about identifying yourself, first of all, take it. But I laughed so hard when I got my report back and read the 7 because I had been fully seen. I don't know about you guys, but I just laughed. I was like, this is crazy that a test knows me this well. So if you heard any of these descriptions and you laughed at one of them, you might have one of those as your dominant types, but definitely take it. For you guys, were you laughing? Were you like, I know some of the types are like, I don't want to be this type, so they run away from it. Like, what was your reaction when you took yours?
think it's more that, like I think, and I see that often with people. It's the one that we don't want to be, the one that hurts, that makes us say like, "Ooh, I don't like this test. This Enneagram it hits a little deep," or like, "This isn't me all the time." Well, that's probably shows that we're right in the right spot because we don't know ourselves by what we get right. We know ourselves by what we get wrong, and we often don't want people to know that.
Yeah.
I know when I took the test and I got a type 2, there was definitely like a stinging feeling of like, ooh, people pleaser. I'm not a people pleaser. But one of the things that I learned through the Enneagram was that it's not based on your behaviors. It's actually based on your motivations, which I think is a really important aspect of it, because even listening through all these types, if one rings true to you, it may, that may be behaviors that you exhibit, but not necessarily how you're motivated. Maybe one of you can go into that a little bit more in depth. But Brad, I will say with you too, I also wanted to be a 7. I was pretty high up in my 7 and I was like a little disappointed that I wasn't. I was like, ooh, they're so fun. I want to be that one.
Totally. Jess hit it so well talking about motivations and fears. And as we all are, like, we're all so different. Like, Jack, you and I are so different. We were raised so differently. We show up so differently at work and in the world. And that's our behavior. But it's also because of who we are. And we do have so many similar motivations. And so it's fun to connect with others of the same type. And we have this on our team. We look around and say, wow, like, we are so different, but also so similar and connected. And the more people can anchor in that motivation and what are the fears of a type versus how they behave, because I think we can all, particularly when healthy, behave certain ways. I can be fun, but I'm definitely not a 7. I can read books and like seek knowledge, but I'm very much not a 5. And so again, we only know ourselves.
Yeah, there was in my training, we were talking about how three different types could do exactly the same thing, but have 3 completely different reasons for doing that thing. So the example was like 3 types could decide they're going to run a really tight meeting. And it could be for 3 reasons. A 7 could run a tight meeting because we're like, we want to squeeze it all in. We want everything. The 1 could run a tight meeting because it's what's right and what's fair for the people in the room. And, a 9 could run a tight meeting because they just don't want people to get upset about not being able to touch on specific topics. So they're trying to keep the peace. But for Jess, I'm so curious. I know you said like you took this and it was a harder time for you. I know we've had tons of laughs. And let me be clear, the laughs were not all like, oh my God, I'm so amazing. My laughs were like, this is awkward. I've been seen. I totally avoid things and fear conflict. So what was yours like?
Yeah, I think for me, it wasn't less, I don't know if I felt exposed as much as like deeply understood and to a level that no person could say to me at that time. I think, I think if I had been in a kind of a healthier spot, it'd been more like, oh, I feel a little exposed, like these are my motives. But because I was in this spot where I was so entangled in these motives and I was so seeing them manifest in their way, it just, for me, became much more this ability to like, oh, this is what's going on. Like, these are all the things I need to work through to find my way back to the path I want to be on. So I think I had a unique experience in that, kind of even the depth of like where I was in my life. I think I was able to immediately see the depth that came through in the assessment. And I'll say this, from the 7, I know there is a tendency. So, we use this at LinkedIn in our leadership workshop that we did in October. And we had, we had everyone by type in these little groups. And so the 7s, there tended to be a predominant, there's 6, I think, in total of 7s. And we were inside and we were in a small space and people were like, I can't work, I can't focus. You have to take that 7 group outside. So we were always like, what's so funny? Like, we're talking about, why are you laughing? Like, the mood kind of wasn't matching the mood. So we got banned and we all had to like go outside. And we were really kind of relishing our 7, like, we're like, they're so scary. Look at us. We're having so much fun. And then we moved by day 3 into like the low sides of the type. And you could just see like everything shifted. And, I remember someone said, I thought we were so great. Why? Are we the most effed up? I think we absolutely are. So, like, you saw this like shift. If like, as we started to unpack it though, like really everything kind of shifted and you saw like, wow, we have a lot of junk like underneath that like happy veneer that's going on that we started to work through. So I feel like, there's still a lot under there that's pretty effed up.
I think we all are there. And like you see with the Enneagram, and we take the test, and depending on which one you take, how connected we all are, right? And like what you're kind of describing is like the sevens move to one in stress and like the low side of one, like being unhealthy. People kind of forget that the seven is very much in the thinking center and in their head. And like, imagine you all got like critical and like started to question things. And we all do that. And we all have that. And again, I think you're able to put a language to it that like it helps you connect with others versus simply kind of the behavioral surface side.
Can you guys talk a little bit about like what does it mean to be healthy or unhealthy as a type? And then Brad, you said like 7 moving to 1. Can you just give a little bit of color there so people are clear on it?
Yeah, Jess, maybe you cover the first part and I'll cover the line.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a level of integration that we have, which is kind of the operating at what level of health. And I think ultimately the best way to describe it is, does this type have me or have I moved beyond my type? And so when we're unhealthy, our type has us. We are shackled by a very narrow way of being in this world. And we're stuck. We're stuck in that box. And so as we move and we kind of can disassociate from the type, that allows us to move beyond the type. But we have to disassociate because we have to see it to be able to move beyond it. And so as we talk about levels of health and integration, the more integrated we become, the more we're able to disassociate from that type and be able to transcend beyond its limitations.
Right, because don't we all have parts of every type in us?
For sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I think the moment we poke into the Enneagram, we start hearing other phrases like lines and wings and subtypes and stances. And that's a lot to cover. And I would say, like, don't worry about it, honestly, to start. But I think the most helpful, like, secondary topic to cover are those lines. And when I say lines, you look at the Enneagram, every number has 2 other numbers connected to it. One is the line of disintegration or stress. Another line is a line of integration or security. And as a 2, I moved 8 in stress and I moved to 4 in security. I don't forget that I'm a 2 and like transform into an 8, but I can take on qualities. And again, the more I'm aware of it, the more healthy I'll be in that move, because stress is going to happen, right? But it's how do we show up in stress to show, are we going to be healthy or not? Or are we going to make an intentional choice to be healthy? What kind of environment do we need and what can we unlock? So for me as a 2, and we're not going to describe all of them, but I moved to 8 in stress. And as I reflected and I saw some of my not so great moments in my career so far, it was often a moment of stress where I maybe felt like someone wasn't valuing me or my opinion. And I showed up on a really unhealthy side of 8 and snapped. But also during stress, if I'm really thoughtful about it, I can show up as powerful and like be an advocate for others. The same with security. I moved to 4, which is like, as a 2, very hard to forget about other feelings, people's feelings, and focus on my own. But that time of like disconnecting from others and reading a book or thinking about something creative, that movie example is probably a great one to fit here, like where I'm kind of like in a secure, healthy spot. That's a move that we can kind of make. And so I would say encourage people, as you know your number, like really sit in that number, but also be like, poke your head up and say like, what are the lines here? And how do I like step into those in a really positive, healthy way?
Yeah. I love how much the Enneagram can help ourselves, but then help your relationships with other people. So even Leah and I, we work so closely together on this podcast, on other things outside of this. And I'm a 2 and she's a 7. And knowing that has really helped us work together, right? When Leah has all of these visionary ideas and going from one thing to the next, I get to rein us back in a little bit. But at the same time, she's able to work with me in my 2 and the way that I work. So I'm curious for each of you, like, how has the Enneagram supported you in relationships, and not just working relationships, but personal as well? Because I know, Brad, you talk about your wife and being a 1, and it really just does help in certain ways. So any stories you can share to give some light onto that?
Yeah, and I think it's so important as we start to learn other people's numbers, we don't use them as weapons. And it's easy to say, but like in stress in the moment, it's easy to snap. Like, you're being such a 7 right now, quit it. And please don't do that, y'all. But my wife was a 1. She's going to hate that we're even talking about her on this podcasts, of course, as ones would, but we are different and we're actually neighboring numbers, but I'm very much not a one. And I don't like rules. I don't like following them. If like there's a rule, I probably will figure out a way to break it. And she doesn't. She grew up understanding that rules are the way that you succeed in the world. And she's so good at them. And she has such high standards and she produces so much. And the more I can understand her, the better I can love her, right? The more I can have compassion for her. And we laugh about all times of like, we're going to dinner in a pre-COVID world and it's like 8 p.m. and there's a no parking sign. Like she won't park there. And I'm like, but no one's going to ticket at 8 p.m. Like what? And like, we got this. Like, but like that's, I don't want to, it doesn't lead to conflict now. I mean, at times it might, but I can have compassion for it. And also, in the one example, our ones can come off a little critical at times, but I know they're 10 times more critical themselves. And there's the ability to think about like, as we know our numbers, there's a great piece of literature around self-care. What do we need to do as every single type to care for ourselves? And in a close, loving relationship, I can invest in like, what do I need to do to love her well? What space can I make for her that she can release who she is? How do ones rest well? What benefits them to kind of find that space? How do they move to 7 in health, et cetera? And I think, again, all of us can have that. That's an example with a 1. We can really just, for our friends, family, like have so much compassion, but also care from there.
Such a great example. Jess, do you have a work one that you can share?
I do. Yeah. I think from a work perspective too, I'm able to understand why I'm in conflict. And it's not just at a behavioral level. Because I mean, we always say assume positive intent, right? But the Enneagram allows us to truly assume that intent, that positive intent, because we can see behind the behavior. Otherwise, we're going to always be making up stories of why they're behaving the way that they did. And so this gives us the ability to like, in its most, I feel like unadulterated form, to really like live by that motto. So for me, I know I was struggling in conflict with someone, and it was someone who was a type 5. And what I realized is, you can imagine, so a type 5, again, boundaries, right? They're looking to always kind of reel things in, right? A 7 is doing the opposite. It's autonomy. It's being unlimited. It's pushing beyond these things. So you had this push and pull of like, well, let's do this and let's go big. And someone always kind of dialing it down to say either no or to make it small, right? And so I was able to like enter the conversation and say, we're not working. Here's what I think may be going on. For me to feel safe, I need to feel like I have the autonomy to be able to do these things and just see how they turn out. For you to feel safe, right, you need to feel like you can say no and rein it in. How can we work through this happy medium? And what it ultimately came down to too was safety. Like, I don't feel safe when someone tells me no. And on the other side, it's like, well, I don't feel safe when someone's pulling me outside of what I feel is realistic and what I can take on. So it's this deeper, we can talk on this much deeper level about not just the behavior we're seeing, but why it's helping us feed our own sense of security in this world.
Do you guys think that has something to do with why we cling so tightly to our Enneagram type is safety? Like I'm thinking about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or, how we transcend in this world. Like safety is such a basic need for us. For sure. I think it also exposes like how many masks we can put on in the world, right? Like we are stepping into the world, and it, as Jess talked about, like these kind of masks that we've learned to put on either through childhood or in the workplace or in relationships that give us love. And I think that is a place of safety, like not being exposed. And so the more we can kind of take that off, the more others can know us, and like they might take theirs off too. And we can kind of connect in a different way.
Well, we so appreciate you both for exposing yourselves a little bit, and sharing some stories and taking your masks off, because that's what In the Arena is all about, and we really aim to bring this type of conversation to our listeners so that they can glean where they stand in terms of how much of their masks are taking off and how much, they're willing to grow. Are there any misconceptions that you two hear that you think people who are exploring the Enneagram or want to start should know?
I would say one for me is like that we are one type, and is kind of, well, I guess the misconception is that we can be multiple types at once, sort of like a combination of flavors, and we can change over time. In my 20s, I was a 5, but I kind of became a 6 when I became a parent, and now I'm in my 40s, I feel like I'm more of a 3. It's like our type, as the kind of studies in science show by the experts, not me, that we kind of became who we are by the time we were out 20, adulthood. And that type was likely fixed and was a combination of our childhood and how we were born and kind of into this world. And so that type is something we need to explore. That's why the Enneagram can be a little more complex, is that it might take layers of figuring out like, which type am I? Am I a 3 or am I a 6? And how am I showing up a little differently based on the situation? How do gender, class, other kind of lessons we've learned play into that? But really kind of taking these 9 numbers and starting with just one and finding that it might take longer to get there, but you don't have to feel like I'm a 6, 7, 4, 5 with a little splash of 9. Like, just be okay with the 6, but also, again, know that 6 so we can know so many other numbers.
And I think for me, it's more of one of the pet peeves I have with the Enneagram, which is when we reduce it to such a level, like, I love all the memes and yes, they're fun, but, I saw something of like, books by type. And I was like, this is just, and, it played into such stereotypical what you would think the books would be. And when I see things like that take it to the extreme where we're trying to like kind of categorically put people and assume all of these things when, again, we're talking about an underlying motive. We're not talking about someone's Netflix interests, but that, it can be fun to go out and to have these things. But I think it also sometimes undermines, really the power and the significance that it can have in describing the core wiring and programming of our lives. And then you see it's like, but you like this book because it's fun. Right? So that for me, that becomes a pet peeve of mine.
It's like when you see the test where it's like, what was Abe Lincoln? Or these other historical figures. And like, Abe Lincoln didn't take the Enneagram. Or others like celebrities currently. Like, unless they take the test and tell you, let's not try to type our politicians or sports stars. Because like, we don't know who they are. And like, that's probably confusing people more than helping.
Yeah.
Right. And there's like the oath you take when you get certified in the Enneagram, right? Is that you won't type other people, which I definitely do. And I won't go into how, but I have done it with so many. I'm curious for you all. We started this with like the role that it could play within work. I think we even talked to it. Brad, you said childhood wounds was something that we often don't talk about at work, which I totally understand. I'm curious from a healing perspective, though, when you think about the Enneagram, the thing that I've loved is it's both psychological and spiritual. And I would love your thoughts on the role both of those things play in us, transcending our types.
I can start because I think the spiritual piece was a big piece. It was a big element for me. And especially, when I said it was a meaning making tool for me. That was the meaning. I think that larger than myself meaning where I'm able to weave in who am I in this world, right? Who really is Jess Amortegui, right? And starting to understand and deconstruct this identity to me is, I feel like touching on something larger and kind of what is that essence underneath. What is that in what is it all wrapped around that I need to dissolve to get at that? Feels like a very much like a spiritual angle to me and a spiritual aspiration, And then psychologically, I feel like it's the ability to be able to just see these deeper motives in myself is the real key in how those motives manifest into a whole host of behaviors, some constructive, some not. But underlying that, it is the root of this that I'm able to kind of expose really helps me, get a better grasp from a psychological perspective of what's really going on inside of me.
Yeah, I think as I've gone on my own leadership journey and started to understand how do I do vulnerability at work, a leader and mentor pointed out to me that it's really more about authentic vulnerability, not just vulnerability and telling a sad story, right? And having that kind of connection. And I think in order to be an authentically vulnerable person, we have to be connected with who we are, that spiritual faith, our journey, and be able to sit in that even if we don't share it fully. And all 4 of us work in a very vulnerable and open, transparent culture. Every culture and region and part of this world is a little different, right? And so just because our calling it LinkedIn calls for this type of leadership. Not everybody's does. We all can know ourselves. We can all be better at home, be better with our family and friends, and just like have the more we can take care of ourselves, the better we can kind of show up and really translate that into the workplace, but also in so much more than that we do.
It makes me think of there's a quote, I'm going to get it wrong, but it's something like, until you heal your wound, you bleed all over others. And I think the Enneagram is a great tool for us to see and heal those wounds.
Mm-hmm. That's such a great way to put it. I mean, we've covered so many topics. I think Jackie and I could talk to you guys for another 2 hours. Like, the Enneagram is like a cult. I feel like now that I'm on board, I'm never leaving.
It's like CrossFit. You can't not talk about it in a conversation.
Yeah, you're like, so what are you?
I mean, I will say that for the holidays last year, me and my peers bought Brad and his wife Enneagram wine glasses and a bottle of wine. So you really can incorporate it into everything.
Totally.
Do you guys have any final thoughts? Assuming that maybe we're 50-50 split between people who've taken it and people who haven't, but that most people haven't gone really deep. Like, what might you want them to know?
I would say like step into it and don't make it like a one-time pop thing. Don't compare it to other tests that are out there, because those tests are wonderful and those like kind of like corporate settings. Like, then make it like, all right, in 2020 we're gonna do the Enneagram, and next year we're gonna do something else. Like, that's okay to do both, but like make sure the Enneagram is a longer term journey, and know that like the more we know your number, the more you will have access to knowing who you are, but really knowing others. And that's what this world is all about, right? And like having that kind of compassion, just sitting in it and like meeting people where they are. But that starts with the kind of knowing yourself and doing that kind of longer work.
I'd also say, I think for me, there were some parts in the report, and I see this a lot, where they may not have been fully conscious. And so you look at it and you immediately reject it. And, one for me in particular was an avoidance of pain. Like I was like, no, I'm not trying to avoid pain. That's silly. Right. And the more I allowed myself to truly contemplate that and to sit with it, right, the more I could see that happening. And I think there's some things that are so confronting to us to see, and that we've never had the opportunity to be exposed to, that, it's easy to just reject and create a different rationale. And so I think, some of those ones that do feel more confronting, and there may be a quick aversion to knee-jerk reaction to just say, no, that's not why, is just to sit with it a bit and just to contemplate it.
That's really good advice, Jess. One book or resource that I want to share with our listeners is called The 9 Types of Leadership by Beatrice Chestnut. Brad had actually recommended it to me and my teammates when we were going through the Enneagram. But curious if you two have any other resources, books, websites that you want to share today where people can get started.
I love Bea Chestnut's book. Also, she has just so many resources online. I think she has a podcast as well that she does. I love the Sacred Enneagram, and there's some Instagram too. I'm thinking of Enneagram Ashton, I think it is. And
my fave.
Yeah. And I have and I think that, for me, just kind of flipping through that daily is always just also a nice kind of foremost reminder. So that's another one I like to follow.
Yeah, I think Beatrice Chestnut is the expert in there. I agree. Her podcast, it's very in depth, but again, she is the foremost author on anything related to the workplace and as a leader. And there's so much great out there. I encourage people to try different authors, but really starting with Beatrice Chestnut, the 9 types of leadership, but also the complete Enneagram, which is like the 27 subtypes. Like, spend a lot of time there, but start with the leadership one. I agree. The Instagram is always fun. I think Enneagram and Coffee is another one that's quite approachable, and you can kind of understand it and get more of that digestible approach. And depending on like kind of your journey, like step into that. The Enneagram Institute is a incredible resource for kind of just understanding mistyping. That's where the RHETI, the Ready, comes from, another testing option in addition to the IEQ9. The integrative Enneagram is how Jess and I and Leah are all kind of learning and training. Again, also a very corporate friendly one for those of us like in the more professional settings, but a lot of great authors out there like Suzanne Stabile, Ian Morgan-Cron, and so many. But yeah, Sacred Enneagram, so many books. We can just go on and on.
Yeah.
Just like be careful like Googling it too much, because you might find a lot of crazy things. Because the Enneagram's not owned by anybody, like compared to a lot of tests out there, right? So any of us can write a book, but I would say start small.
Well, you both, it has been amazing. I hope for our list. Okay, I've learned a lot. I'll start there, but love just having you both on. I love that we're 2s and 7s hanging out together. It actually would have been funny to bring people of different types on, like bring on like a 1 and an 8 and see how this all went. But I love this peaceful, fun environment. But thank you guys both for joining us. I mean, this has been awesome. I hope for our listeners, you feel like you've learned a little bit about the Enneagram and have some curiosity about what else is out there. I'll agree with everything y'all said. It really is a life-changing thing to start digging into and understanding more about yourself. I love that thing you said, Brad. We can all understand ourselves. So anyhow, you all know how to find us. We are on iTunes. We are on Spotify. We are on Google Podcasts. And you can reach us at inthearena@linkedin.com. We cannot wait for you to continue this journey with us, and we'll see you next time.
Have a great day, everyone.